We trust the lamb, not the donkey or the elephant.
So I do want to start with your story. Maybe just tell us a bit about your family and your own experiences as a child and teenager as you navigated your own mixed ethnic heritage.
Yeah, well, you even bringing that up, that it's such a rare conversation to even have, was the reason that I got on this journey of even writing a book about it, speaking about it, and grappling with it. Because I guess the place in the story I can start from, maybe as like a crisis point that then made me dive into my past to unpack some of those stories, and then up to now, was in 2020 when we were having conversations around race and ethnicity. And for people to know, I was raised in South Texas, in San Antonio, Texas. So about 2.5 hours from the border. And my father, he is Mexican. My mother is Dominican. They're both immigrants in their early teens, moving to the United States. And so I am second generation Latino, Afro Latino on my mom's side. So if my mom is a Black woman, but she is Latina. She's Hispanic, speaks Spanish. That's the Hispanic part, Latina, Latin America, but African ancestry. And my father is from Nogales, Mexico, from Mexico. And so when this conversation around race happened, especially in the BLM movement, Black Lives Matter movement, my mother is a part of the Black community. So I'm 50%, if you will, Black community, but also 50% Hispanic, Latino, Mexican, my dad's side. So growing up in San Antonio. And so, I think when this topic hit me, that I was like, wait a second, I don't know who has an answer for this, because I feel like no answers are answering this for me. Like there are answers out there, but felt inadequate. Was a moment I had on the east side of San Antonio. We had a forum, and it was like a social justice forum at a local church, a Black church in San Antonio, where we had councilmen there, we had the chief of police there, several African-American pastors, white pastors, and a couple of Latino pastors. And in that conversation, I never forget, my mother stands up. Maybe there were several people that had shared, and it was kind of an open mic. She stands up and she pauses and kind of looks around the room, and she opens with the phrase, "I'm confused." And I, and like, it was like a movie. Like the way she paused, looked around, said, "I'm confused," and then paused again. Like the tension in the room was just, it was palpable. Yeah. And she turns around, she says, "I have raised my son under the cultural pretense that he should be careful when he drives around or when he walks around our neighborhood because of the color of his skin, as a young Black man." But we're hearing now, here in 2020, that us that are both Black and Latino, we're getting mixed signals on whether or not we're allowed to be in this conversation right now. So I'm confused. I don't know if the answer is no for us to be able to speak up right now, or the answer is yes. But what I can say is I don't know. And I want to know if my son can participate in this conversation, if I can participate in this conversation. And really that kind of, that really hit home for me, because I at the time was looking on Facebook, and I would see a lot of All Lives Matter posts, but they weren't by white people. They were by Mexican friends and people from the community. They were all Hispanic. And then simultaneously, all my African-American friends and Caribbean friends that were putting Black Lives Matter posts. But so I kind of was thrust into this complicated conversation in that way, and not even realizing that there were so many dimensions that I didn't know I hadn't come to terms with. And then as that was happening, I would remember growing up in schools where predominantly Hispanic, and I was the Black boy, right? Like I was called every slur, if you will, Black slur. But I'm also 100% Latino. I'm 100% Hispanic. Like both of my parents are from Latin America. both of my parents are Hispanic, Spanish speaking. I'm bilingual, and yet all of my interactions with racism and uh, my African ancestry came from the Latino community and not so much the Anglo community. And so that's just to kind of set everyone in the place of 2020 was a confusing time finding my voice and ultimately finding that, yeah, there needs to be a niche to have this conversation.
Yeah, I love your mom's boldness and courage, because to say I am confused is about the last thing anyone is ever willing to admit in the moment. We
Yeah.
think that we have to have the answers. We think that we have to have the solutions. And yet, when we're talking about something as complex as ethnic identity, and then you add into that the complexities of the history of ethnic strife in the United States, well, man, I'm confused too, and I'm glad someone's saying it. But as you already highlighted, that situation of confusion is more acute if you, with your own ethnic background, don't fit into maybe the neat categories that are being discussed in the big public discourse. And you wrote in your book how this experience with your mom began to make you think about your past and reflect on your own experiences as a child as you were trying to navigate your own ethnic identity. So maybe we can start there. You shared the story about growing up in elementary school being in a predominantly white school at that point, and that changes in the future. But can you start there with I think you were taking a standardized test and you had to check some boxes.
Yeah, no, one of the jokes I made early on whenever I started doing these talks was, until the age of 20, I was a white man, like I've been white for 20 years of my life. And really, at least in the eyes of the government, I was. And in standardized testing in Texas, the time that I was growing up in the early 2000s, really the only racial boxes that you had was white, black, Asian, Pacific Islander, and you had to choose one of those. And so, being in class, we would ask the teacher, all of us kids that are Hispanic, we would ask, we're like, teacher, well, where do we circle Latino? And they're like, oh, well, that's not a race. That's an ethnicity. We got another category over here, but you have to circle something on race. And the default for Hispanics was white. And so the teacher would always, and so that was just kind of my, it almost didn't even become a thought anymore for like several years, because I knew that the second category would help, not realizing that I'm marking white on all of these things for the doctor, for school, and then my name is Eliezer, but I go by Ellie. And so, I got the name confusion, the circling checkbox confusion was there. And so I think early on, it was confusing at first. And then it was like, oh, I guess this is the way things are. I'm not going to ask any questions, because also all the Hispanics in my class are circling the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, that was really confusing at first, for
sure. So what led to the change where you said, I'm actually going to start checking the black box?
That was post 2020, where I had a bit of angst around like, but it's true. Like I've been on all of the things that were mentioned with the African American struggle, or the black struggle. I think more specifically the black struggle. I've experienced. I've been followed around. I've been put on the hood of my car. I've been pulled over for, reasons, quote unquote, wondering why my license, for example, one of the times that I got pulled over and pulled out of my car was in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge. I just had Texas license plates. That's the only, they asked me to step out of my car on a bullhorn, surrounded me with like three SUVs, just a case of mistaken identity. And really, to justify why I got pulled out of my car was, well, why do you have Texas plates in Louisiana? And I'm like 18. I'm like, I don't know, because Louisiana's next door to Texas. I'm like, do you not see Texas plates out here? We're like 3 hours from the Texas border. And a lot of different other things, as I mentioned, names and slurs directed towards me. And so I, in a lot of ways, have had that experience. But like when I broke it down racially, I felt like, and this is not to blanket anyone with this experience, like to say that this is the way anyone that has a mixed heritage should go. Just to give kind of my take on it, there was a little redemption that I felt like I needed, where I was presented again when my son was born. What is the race of the father? Right? Like my ethnicity is Latino Hispanic. And I was presented with race. And I think it was like the first time in a while that I had seen those boxes and I had to check them again. And I looked at the boxes and I was like, man, my mom, when she did her ancestry, she is so Nigerian. She has so much Nigerian in her blood. And, me looking like a doppelganger of my mom, I'm like, well, I'm going to circle black. I mean, my African ancestry is West African. And so I'm going to go ahead and circle black. And I went ahead and did that. And it felt like for the first time I embraced officially, like I put it on an official documentation that I embraced this side of me. And so that's, I think, what led, I don't think it was anything deeper than that, other than, man, I have an opportunity to say yes to this thing. Do I agree with racial categorizations the way that they are in the United States? No. And I outlined that in the book. But I think for myself, participating in that was more for an acceptance of a part of me that I never had an official embracing of until that definitive moment on a piece of paper. And so yeah, I hope that's a clear explanation to why I said yes to that in that moment.
I'm Patrick. Thanks for watching this video. If you're passionate about ending tribalism in the church and giving Jesus your allegiance, you're not alone. We have a podcast and a book. They're both called Truth Over Tribe. You can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can buy the book on Amazon. I hope you'll check them out.